Welcome back, everybody. It's another episode of Let's Move Austin.
Hello, everybody. Hello, Chris.
Hello, Teresa. Teresa Bastian, our host. Thanks for having us again.
Absolutely. I love this.
Well, we're talking about some, I don't know if it's touchy. Maybe it's like thankful. Like we're so glad to be having this conversation. I don't know.
No, I think generally in my experience, it's pretty touchy.
Yeah. Well, I mean, divorce is never exciting, but it is important to talk about because, you know, if you don't do it right, then, you know, you can have it can all hit the fan, if you know what I mean. So
yeah.
Walk me through, what do we need to know? Like, what are some of the things?
Sure. I think it's interesting. Most people don't realize that realtors are often an essential part of the conversation in a divorce where the couple owns property. And a lot of times, you know, your instinct is to hire a divorce attorney. And yet there are so many considerations beside your divorce attorney in how you're going to unmesh your lives and your estates, essentially.
Right.
I get a lot of calls. Actually, I've probably dealt with over 30 divorces over the course of my career.
Wow.
And only a couple were mine. No, just kidding. But not really kidding. Yeah. I do think that having been through a divorce, I have a level of empathy that might not be possible if I hadn't lived it myself. A lot of people are very anxious or embarrassed when they reach out to me, even people I've known personally for a long time and have no reason to be embarrassed. It is still a touchy subject for a lot of people.
Yeah. Well, and not just the empathy of it, but then there are actual like things you wouldn't know tangibly, like the action steps if you hadn't been through it. Like, so, I mean, there's that piece of it too, you know?
Well, one thing to start by, start at the top is a lot depends on what state you live in. Yeah. Texas, where I live, is a community property state, which means it doesn't matter who owned the house before they got married, or if you each owned a house and you sold one, but now you live in one. None of that matters. According to a community property state, that property is owned 50-50 by both of you. Right. And anything that you would negotiate separate from that is a negotiation. Even if, you know, you owned it first, you owned it free and clear, the fact that you've been married while you lived in that house or condo or whatever and shared expenses for it. Yep. Unless you did a very, very unusual thing and you kept all your expenses in a private account, paid the mortgage from a private account that your spouse wasn't on. Even if you bought that property using your grandma's inheritance, chances are you've mixed your funds along the way, and that property is now legally 50-50 between you and your spouse.
Right.
So that's a first place to start if you live in a community property state like Texas.
So my question becomes then, how do you know if you keep the house? Like, you know, we're going to get divorced. We kind of co-own it, evidently, because of community property state. Right, like, do I keep it? Do I not? How do I decide that?
Well, it's a really difficult matrix. And I think it bears a lot of thoughtful consideration. Not to be sexist, but most women do end up with primary custody of the children. And most women, out of almost an instinct or a knee-jerk reaction, they immediately say, I've got to keep the house. I've got to keep things the same for the kids. And while there is value to that, if your priority is keeping your kids in a house that you can no longer afford, you know, this may not end well. And by end, I mean, you know, a year, 12, 24 months from now, however long you can prolong the agony of living in something you can't afford. It can really wear you down. It can really limit your ability to provide for your kids and your own self-esteem. If you're taking on, say, a 3,400 square foot house that used to be supported by two incomes. Right. So I really, I think the first place to start is to talk to someone you trust that also has a background in real estate and can help you with valuation, what you think property taxes are going to do in the future, what is the real maintenance cost of a house like this, and then do some extrapolating about what other options might be.
Right.
Like maybe you could stay in the same school zone, but downsize to a smaller place. There are options out there, but a lot of times when the overwhelming number of decisions regarding your marriage or your custody are in play, sometimes you just knee-jerk cling to the house, and that may not be the best decision for some people.
Well, it makes me think of the next question I have, which is how do you know when to bring an agent in? Because this is the conversation that needs to happen sort of, I'm guessing, a lot sooner than maybe some are having it.
Yes. I've always suggested that people do their homework first. I have had clients come to me that, they were absolutely blindsided by, being served, and now they're in the divorce proceedings with no warning. Right. That's pretty unusual. Yep. In my experience, people generally have some warning. Maybe they've been going to marriage counseling and it's not providing what they thought, or maybe they just openly are talking about, I don't think this is working. Spouse and spouse are kind of coming to the same conclusion together. It's not always confrontational. Right. But generally, people have some lead time. I would suggest contacting a realtor or, some kind of professional that has this information early in the process.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, because
like gathering information,
because that's where you can start to look at the valuation stuff. Like, what would it cost to maintain it, to keep it? Right. And then I think if the conversation about divorce with the spouse is constructive, right, and not like out of the blue, but then some of these conversations can actually go towards, I would imagine, like what gets negotiated in the divorce.
Right.
Anyway, right.
Because let's say there's $200,000 of equity in the house.
Right.
If, let's say in this situation, it's a traditional situation where he offers he offers the wife the equity in the house. Well, that's potentially $200,000 of maybe alimony, maybe college fund. What is the trade-off for getting that $200,000 stake in a house that you potentially are going to have to sell in a year? Right. Maybe that isn't the best investment in it. And there's so many nuances, but I think the most successful dialogues I've had have been where I've been contacted fairly early. Yeah. If it's amicable, both spouses know that I'm in on this and they feel comfortable with me as a resource. Sometimes I kind of have an initial conversation with each person separately. Yeah. Just to let them know where my background is, my experience, what I'm here to do, and no pressure. Those are some of the most effective. Yeah. Sometimes it's a very high conflict situation. One party doesn't trust the other party, and they don't want the other party to know I'm involved. And that's fine too. It's always more difficult that way, but sometimes that's how it is. Yeah. Right. I think another thing that has been very helpful in the past is when the client asks me to coordinate with their divorce attorney. Because then the divorce attorney is hearing straight from me on the issues that matter as far as valuation and real estate. Right. And it's not playing the telephone game, especially if the person going through the divorce is feeling overwhelmed or never really got into the nuts and bolts of real estate financing, and it might be a little over their head. Putting the two professionals in touch can be a very effective strategy. Right. Yeah. Yeah. What are any other nuances that you've seen, like in the 30 families you've helped, or, in these situations, like what else gets missed or what else is helpful to know? I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. I'm just curious what else is helpful to know, like going through this process. Is there anything that we missed or any nuances? Yeah, I think that there are, a lot of times people think the only options are, I keep the house or we have to sell the house right now. Mm-hmm. And that, again, it's kind of a knee-jerk reaction. You get into these stressful situations, and often our minds do the fight or flight thing. It's all or nothing. It's black or white. It's left or right. And sometimes, again, the value in discussing this with a professional is to slow down your thought process, be reminded that there are multiple possible outcomes. Yeah. Sometimes, the house can be put in a trust, and one spouse can live in it until the kids graduate from high school, and it's somehow, partially funded by the bigger earner spouse. I mean, there are multiple ways. Wow. And it's a big negotiating. Of course, the more equity you have in the house, the bigger a negotiating point it is. Right. But I've seen situations where, one party really wanted to stay in the house, but the other party was demanding their share of the equity. This person that wanted to keep the house didn't have the money to pay off the other person.
Mm-hmm.
But I was able to remind them that maybe you could qualify for a home equity line of credit, take out the cash, pay your soon-to-be ex, and carry on.
Right.
And
Good
that
point.
was a very winnable solution for the parties I'm talking about. But it wasn't something that was on their mind.
Right. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
That's
So I think, best advice is to just take a step back and breathe, and then be reminded there might be possible solutions out there that you're not even thinking of.
Mm-hmm.
So being able to brainstorm with a realtor can be very, very important. And most realtors, I mean, certainly me, but I do think most of my colleagues are willing to talk to you, even though it may not result in a sale. It may result in one of you keeping the house.
Right.
And that's fine, because when our expertise is useful to someone who's going through a tough time, at least for me, that makes it all worthwhile.
Absolutely. Well, speaking of that, like if people want to reach out to you and talk about options, like what's the best way to connect with you?
Best way is to just give me a call or text, 512-297-3442. And my email should be on the screen.
Perfect. Awesome. Teresa, thanks for bringing this type of a topic. I mean, this is the stuff
You're welcome. It's a tough time to go through. But again, if you stay in the emotional place, you can really miss some opportunities to make a good, solid foundation for your lives, both of your lives moving forward.
Yeah, no, that's so good. Awesome stuff. Well, if you guys want to reach out to Teresa, she gave you her phone number. You guys can also go to letsmoveaustin.com. It's Teresa's website. And Teresa, thanks for this. We'll catch you in the next episode.
Sounds good. Thanks, Chris.
See ya.